Hello and welcome to our conversation on LinkedIn's top startups. I'm Jessie Hempel, host of LinkedIn's editorial podcast, Hello Monday, and I'm here today with two members of the Footprint Coalition, Robert Downey Jr., who you may know from Hollywood, and John Schieber, who you may know from his writing on venture capital. Robert, I was amazed at how many different avenues to tackling problems you have created. You've really been, it's hard to define or box what you are trying to do. So I want you to talk to me a little bit about the origin. Where did this come from? When did it begin?
I had finished up my Marvel contract. I was wondering what I was going to do with the rest of my life. I got invited to be a keynote speaker at Remars, and I didn't want to just show up and song and dance it. I really wanted to verbally and from my heart commit myself to saying, I'm really going to try to be part of the creative problem-solving team. And like Schieber always says, this is an all-hands moment. We know in the last 6 months even that it's become so painfully obvious that the climate crisis is the greatest health and survival challenge of our time.
I absolutely hear you, Robert. We are speaking in a week where I live in New York City, we had floods. Where my in-laws live in the deep South, they had floods. The West is on fire. And that, by the way, is just the last week and just in North America. We feel it. We feel it viscerally. How did you decide that startups was what to do about it?
It dovetails exactly with what, Jessie, what you brought up. I mean, my family, I grew up in Baton Rouge, and none of these threats are academic to me. Climate change is real. The climate crisis is real. And startups are uniquely positioned to address. There need to be new solutions to these problems that are going to come to market. And as storytellers, we're able to help craft that story and get people behind these young companies as they sort of move along their journey and fulfill their mission to provide solutions to the climate problems that we face.
So I want to talk about the starting the companies part, and we'll do that in a second. But before we get there, to stick with climate change for a second, I've been a reporter for a couple of decades, and one challenge to talking about climate change is that it seems so large and intractable, like this massive confounding set of problems that is so large that, I'm just going to drink from the straw and forget to recycle because nothing I do matters anyways, right? And there's something magical about startups because they're scrappy. They get started real quick. It's a lot of throw things at the wall and see what sticks. But where do you find the in this massive, intractable problem for startups to even be helpful?
Well, Robert, if you don't mind, I'll take a crack.
No, please.
The ways in which climate solutions have been presented have been individual solutions to systemic problems. And one of the things that we see from the startup community is trying to tease out solutions that can happen or that are able to integrate into these big systems to address their problems, right? So whether it's converting from petrochemicals to bio-based chemicals, whether it's the development of new energy generation technologies, whether it's sort of the new plastics that companies in our portfolio like RWDC are working on, or the companies like Climate AI, another investment of ours, that are working to help better predict climate challenges so that companies can address them going forward. These are all the kinds of technologies that help solve problems, right? And real problems that industries face rather than individuals, because putting the onus of responsibility on the individual doesn't actually solve the problem.
Well, so I love this idea of a coalition because as we said at the beginning, there's not one path to fixing this set of problems. And if you are in Silicon Valley and you work in tech, then every problem is a problem that a startup can fix. If you come out of the nonprofit sector, then every problem is a problem that philanthropic dollars should be able to fix. if you come out of business, every problem is a problem that business should be able to fix. And what we know about right now is that we're going to have to figure out how to work across lines. So how did you, Robert, how did you map out the different areas that you were going to focus on? Because you're a little bit of all those things, right?
Yes. And we found out pretty quickly, and by the time we'd had our first kind of several intensives, that we really have to be a business first. And we have to think like a young, hungry company. How are we going to sustain through the thin times while we're beta testing ideas? How do we give ourselves space and time to experiment and make those mistakes without having to drag down any co-investors or any public company that we're trying to help with us? So I think a lot of it is just, this was a from the gut thing for me. This was I didn't know consciously why I was going so boldly into this space that was kind of unfamiliar.
There's a lot of things about the different pillars of the organization that are really complementary. The production arm gives us a vantage point both to talk about some of the technologies that we're seeing on the investment side. And then we have this investment arm that can sort of capitalize on that by putting dollars to work. And then all of that gets sort of complemented by the nonprofit work, which is designed to help deploy these technologies into communities that otherwise wouldn't have access to them.
We are not trying to be some dominant force. We are not solely interested in what our bottom line is. We want to find a space where we can be utilized best for the highest good, which is the exact opposite of big business. So we have to be able to, compete and be solvent and show our investors that they're doing as well or better with us than they would because of the competitive edge we have we have no trouble finding an audience. We have no trouble telling the story. We have no trouble giving a competitive edge, which also comes back to, and Sheber does this with me pretty often. He goes, we then have to be very selective and diligent about whom we choose to give the brighter spotlight to, because it doesn't behoove us to help, the competing folks in a certain sector to give this entity more attention if in fact they aren't the best people. They aren't the best chance at making it work.
So, a lot of our members who are tuning in for this conversation, either they haven't worked in startups before and they're interested in getting into startups, or maybe they have worked in startups, but they haven't worked on the climate. And now they, like you, are so motivated by what they see happening around them that they want to make that switch. But these are technical problems often, and figuring out your way in is hard. And Robert, I would love to just hear a little bit about how you made, let's call it a career broadening. When you wanted to go in this direction, where did you learn how to do it?
In some ways, everything is like everything else in that in whatever industry you're talking about, you have a generation of people. And I'm kind of quoting what John said when we were talking yesterday. And I said, forget everything that I said for the last half hour. Just keep this one little piece about there's a generation of people who want corporate governance. They want to feel like where they're working speaks to who they are and what their beliefs are. And that X's out about 95% of the opportunities that would have seemed glowing and attractive 5, 7, 10 years ago. So we're talking about old templates are being rejected by those that are going to inherit what we're hopefully part of setting up right now. So it's such an exciting time. So I think what really drove me forward into this is I feel a buzz. Like I've done really well in my day job and I still have an interest and there's still mountains to climb there. But, this to me feels like the new normal. I feel like so many jobs, so many opportunities, where it used to be scientists had this knowledge that they were holding back and it was all, Greek to me. It's the information age. There's going to be such an influx of young, bright, diverse, gifted, and discerning people that we kind of have to start saying, my God, if I could have been in a semi-utopian generation, what might it have looked like, and how can we be part of setting the table for that generation?
Well put. Well, so Robert, you spoke earlier about one of the things that you had learned, because Footprint Coalition very much is a startup. You said, we learned we needed to be a business.
Yeah.
What else have you learned the hard way? I mean, let's assume also that a lot of our members are trying to build their own startups, and it's harder than you think it will be, always, no matter what.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
And look, I mean, I think we can all agree that when the Oz's curtain gets pulled back, you don't want to be caught flat-footed, having been able to talk a good game, but not be able to deliver on what you are promising your investors and the customer. We've seen versions of that. There's a fine lady who was talking about a certain kind of blood testing, and she's in the atmosphere there. Much more often, it's middle-aged white guys. So I'm the most likely person to be selling a bill of goods to an unsuspecting public. So I think part of it is you just go, you really, really have to be able to make good on what you're offering, because we all know this. I come from a business that is based on this, and then the movie sucks. So, but I think across all of the tops of every tree of every major industry, there are people who are seasoned enough to know that, you know what, it isn't 9 out of 10 fail. 9 out of 10 fail for those people who have to justify why they are going by an old rubric and an old way of thinking about things that is outmoded. So then what's the answer? The answer to me really is, it is that evolved creative problem solving. And that's what's been really exciting for me. Yeah. And so, but to answer the question, we realized that sometimes we were falling into the same ruts of companies that we wouldn't support. And that is a real gut check moment, because we naturally go to this place of everybody just wants to do the thing they know and this and that, So part of it has been, it is an ongoing pride swallowing siege of an education, because you have to keep changing your perspective or you're going to get left behind and you're going to make simple mistakes.
Have you made any mistakes that you've learned from?
John, how many mistakes have I made, and did I learn from any of them?
I mean, what is a mistake but an opportunity to learn and grow? I don't want to underemphasize how much of a career you still have in Hollywood. It's not like you've changed careers. You're just coming off of that sweet tooth, awesomeness that at Netflix, you've got like a couple new shows coming out. So it's not like there's a rejection of the business of show business. But I also think that, like, to that point, I think the show business or the storytelling angle really encompasses a lot of what Footprint is hoping to do too, because there are so many levers to pull to educate an audience, to get people involved, to engage with folks about the climate emergency, that it's not just necessarily about the technical skills that are required. It's an all hands on deck kind of thing, which I say repeatedly. But this plays out in any number of ways. You've got companies that are advertising for or posting for positions on LinkedIn in the climate space that are looking for marketing executives, that are looking for public relations people, that are looking for all of the most experienced programmers they can find, because this doesn't work unless all of the different technologies that are at our disposal are brought to bear on the problem.
Folks, I have to say, this was really rich. And it's not just that it was really enjoyable. It was. I can't tell you how many people I talk to who want to get involved in climate startups. This kind of conversation serves as an anchor and a booster for that. So thank you.